Hi everyone. I think we can start. It's a little bit past 6. Hi, I'm Lieben Shitrit. I'm the Henry and Marilyn Taub Associate Professor of Hebrew and Judaic Studies here at NYU, and I'm also the director of the Taub Center for Israel Studies. And I see a lot of new faces here, so please sign up to our mailing list. Back there on the table, we have a lot of really exciting events coming up this semester and next semester. But let me, without any further ado, introduce our speaker today, Professor Yofi Tirosh, who is a feminist legal scholar and a nationally recognized award-winning human rights activist. Professor Tirosh is an associate professor and vice dean at the Tel Aviv University Faculty of Law, former dean of the Sapir Academic College, School of Law, and a senior research fellow at the Shalom Hartman Institute in Jerusalem. An expert in anti-discrimination law and in law and culture, her recent work focuses on the tension between gender equality and religion. Before writing her PhD at the University of Michigan Law School, she received her LLB from the Hebrew University and clerked at the Israel Supreme Court. She's also been very much involved in what's happening right now in Israel, and we're all anxious to hear your updates on the situation. Please join me in welcoming Professor Tirosh.
Do we need this for the recording? Okay, great. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. And thank you to Professor Lieben Shitrit and to Shane Figueroa, did I say it right? For making this event possible and the Taub Center. When Lee and I planned this event in the spring, we agreed on this title, Gender and the 2023 Crisis in Israel, Field Notes from the Protest and Resistance. It's still a good title, but had I kind of chosen the title today, I would have added another subtitle. Why and how did the Mechitza become the emblem of the protests and of Israel's, something of the fight on Israel's democracy. That's the title that I would have chosen. This year's Yom Kippur, just 8 days ago, was perhaps the saddest since the Yom Kippur that marked the beginning of the traumatic war in 1973. Clashes at the heart of Tel Aviv revolved around the Mechitza, the divide that is a fixture in Orthodox synagogues, differentiating the men area designated to men and the women's section, Ezrat Nashim. I would like to offer some thoughts tonight on my understanding of the role of the Mechitza in the political crisis in Israel and what we should make of it. But before I get to the main point, I need to kind of make sure that we're all on the same page with the political situation and the legal situation. So let's do a kind of a brief background recap. In December 29 of 2022, the 37th government was established. It was the most right-winged and most religious government that has ever been established in Israel. A few days later, in January 4th, Justice Minister Yariv Levin gave a speech to the nation in which he described his plans to what he called the legal reform. The plan included several steps, all aimed to attack the rule of law, weaken the judicial system, so to give full control to the government on judicial appointment, to enable the Knesset to bypass any laws that the Supreme Court strikes down on constitutional grounds in Israel's version of the Constitution. Ask me about it later. It's a complicated diluting judicial review mechanisms from, so using all kinds of grounds that say, okay, you can't use this ground to strike down laws, and generally weakening the authority of the Attorney General and the legal councils in governmental ministries, making them like private lawyers, not aiming at serving the rule of law, but at representing the minister at all costs, no matter how illegal the plan of that minister is. Very quickly, and much due to the efforts of legal academics, some of them are sitting here, they came to rest a little bit, so we kind of found ourselves like epidemiologists during COVID. We understand the danger, and we have the means to explain the danger to policymakers, to politicians, and mainly to the public. And pretty quickly, the name that we suggested to what's going on is not the legal reform, but the judicial overhaul, representing the intention of the government to take over the power of the judicial branch and remove any checks and balances. The government's plans, as you know, were met with unprecedented protest in what is now clear is a globally unique example of a non-violent, resilient, and creative resistance. Israelis took to the streets for, I think now we are at 39 consecutive weeks. There's no kind of softer, easier way of saying this. For me, as for many Israelis, the last 10 months have been earth-shattering. Hundreds of thousands of Israelis experienced the rapidly unfolding events with horror and disbelief, having to face the fact that the government is determined to turn Israel into a corrupt, theocratic autocracy. I do not say this as a manner of speaking, I say this literally. I cannot think of a single day during these months in which, like many, many others, I did not dedicate many hours that were supposed to go to routine and regular professional commitments, to my family, to, you know, my leisurely activities, where this time did not go to work on efforts of stopping this, curbing this. In July, my partner and I decided to escape for 10 days to India. And I managed to archive my WhatsApp groups. WhatsApp is where the protest is happening in Israel. Sometimes I think it's really a scheme by Meta to increase our use of their app. But even then, with personal messages, I had to answer questions, and I even wrote an op-ed about the unreasonableness clause. You know, I'm sitting in a massage, and I'm, there is this argument. Okay, come to the room. But then we're getting back, and we're sitting, waiting for our connecting flight at the Delhi airport, and I take a deep breath, and I unarchive the WhatsApp groups, okay? And this is the first screen in many screens of WhatsApp. Just look at the numbers. There are people here nodding because they're identifying with this experience, okay? And I literally, as if India never happened, I get a literal anxiety attack. Like my breathing is short, my muscles are, caught up. And this is kind of to give you a sense of the temperature, of the phenomenology of being in this experience for so many months. Every week that goes by proves how right we are to be alarmed. The list of legislative proposals that is on the table that the government is expected to enact as soon as they take over the court leaves no room for doubt about its intentions to suppress free speech, harm the media, and limit academic freedom, freedom of association, and the freedom of labor unions. Give unlimited power to rabbis and to rabbinical courts. For example, waiving rabbis from any responsibility for insightful hate speech that would have otherwise been illegal. Remove any remainders of the welfare state and social network, the safety net that Israel used to have, except for the settlers and the ultra-Orthodox, to whom the government is already transferring way over their fair share of budget, subsidies, jobs, and other sectorial and almost davka advantages. That's how it feels. All this is done in ways that are familiar to Americans here, pretending to care for the underprivileged in the social and geographic and economic periphery, but in effect increasing the advantage of those who are already advantageous, claiming that they aspire to increase the diversity in the Supreme Court, while in fact having no intention and no interest to nominate women to the Supreme Court, Palestinians or Sephardic Jews who are historically underrepresented in the court, conspiracy arguments against the deep state, exhausting the public by releasing one unbelievable headline after the other. We've been doom scrolling, as I'm sure you remember from the days of your previous president, and also trying to disempower and demoralize the citizen body by constant straight-faced lies that are designed to make us give up on the hope and to know the facts. So there is no reason to even try to decipher what is the truth, because distractions and unfaithful depictions of reality are everywhere, and I know you know the drill and it sounds familiar to you. Netanyahu has a coalition of 64 Knesset members out of 120, so that's a pretty stable coalition, as we have been discovering. And this coalition is coming after 3 years of political instability, during which Israel had 5 rounds of election. Just imagine what it does to a country to have 5 rounds of election in 3 years. The penultimate election ended in a government called the Change Government, a kind of a collaboration of unlikely bedfellows from the entire spectrum, whose organizing principle was, let's do it without Netanyahu. In this government, there are 4 major players: the Likud party, the center-right party headed by Netanyahu, the Sephardic ultra-Orthodox party, the Ashkenazi ultra-Orthodox party, and a new party called the Religious Zionist Party, which dominant forces in are based on ideas of Jewish supremacy and fundamentalist Judaism, which Netanyahu helped legitimate in the months before the elections, because he understood that he needs these seats in the Knesset in order to be able to establish a government. There are seats in the front. If it's okay for you, you're really welcome, so you don't stand. So on this backdrop, the coalitional negotiations, which analysts thought will take 2 days because it's such an easy alliance, lingered and lingered until the very last moment. They were longer than expected. And the reason was that, as we know today, the partners of Netanyahu, the other parties, just behaved like children in a candy store, asking whatever they can, think of, and getting whatever they wished for, as unlikely as and unreasonable as it was. This again may sound familiar, but Netanyahu, who, as you know, is under trial, facing 3 indictments, has been mobilizing his trial to delegitimate the prosecution and the courts, claiming that the indictments are a politicized and undemocratic attempt to dethrone him against popular will. Okay, and as you know, okay, so this is the kind of the government. As you know, he was here just a week and a half ago, giving many interviews to the main networks, not to a single Israeli TV channel or a journalist, and is refusing to say that he will abide by the rulings of the Supreme Court. There are currently 2 pending landmark questions on the table. One has to do with the legality or constitutionality of an amendment that sets extreme limitations on declaring the prime minister incapacitated. To the naked eye, it's a personal and retroactive law tailored for Netanyahu. The other case has to do with the another amendment to a basic law that limits the judicial discretion on administrative decisions against the government. It's called the unreasonableness clause. Okay, so the first phase of the protest focused almost solely on the judicial overhaul, and rightfully so. Because guaranteeing a democratic process and procedure and the institutions that protect basic rights is key for everything else. But after a few weeks, the realization crept in that while we, on one hand, have to stop the taking over the courts and paralyzing the attempts to paralyze the legal system, it is also essential to recognize, map, and understand what is this for. That is, why is it so important for the government to paralyze the judicial system? Now, there are particular interests. Netanyahu holds a grudge against the judicial system. He wants to engineer things so that he can somehow maybe arrange a plea garden, fire the attorney general, control who are the judges that are in the Supreme Court when his lawyers submit the appeal from the district court. The ultra-Orthodox mainly want to paralyze the court's ability to say that the fact that the ultra-Orthodox men are not drafted, are waived from the military draft, is unequal, is unconstitutional. The court had said so before, and the government is dragging its feet with applying this decision. And the religious Zionists, as they are called, primarily want to annex the occupied territories without giving the Palestinians equal rights. Now, this map of interest that I just described is the prevalent description accepted by pretty much all analysts in Israel. But this account, I would like to suggest, is missing. It is fundamentally impaired because it is disregarding of the role of gender and its centrality, both as a central means and as a key target of Israel's current regime. So let's have a look at this government and its gender makeup. The share of women in this government is minuscule. Only 6 out of 33 ministers are women. 3 of them are ministers only by title and salary and car, without any authority or actual responsibility. Out of the 33 governmental ministries, there is 1 ministry in which a woman is the CEO the Director General. Just one, it puts us in the bottom of the world comparative tables. And what I want to say is that this is not just good old chauvinism, which we know around the world, the familiar old boys network, that men bring other men to politics and nominate them to roles. For example, two of the four parties in this government, which are the two ultra-Orthodox parties, they are 28% of the coalition. Overtly refuse to let women be members and get elected as representatives, grounding the refusal in religious reasons. The political and the legal system in Israel has lacked the political ability, I would say also the kind of clarity and resolution to set boundaries and guarantee simply that no party can compete in the elections if it denies a political participation based on biology. The staff, this is the heads of the parties. That's the key players in this government. When you look at the entourages and the people around the prime minister and around the ministers, there are simply no women there. This is an example from last week. This is for you, and kudos to all the friends of Israel in the US for doing this amazing work that you are doing. During this visit, I thought I had an image of Netanyahu's staff shaking the hands of President Biden, and maybe it will come up in a minute. It's one man after the other. Women simply are not there. They do not count, they do not participate in the game. And this picture, I think, for those of you who know Israel, is kind of hard to grasp in a country in which gender equality is in its ethos, it's in its DNA. It's a country that from its inception gave women suffrage. It's a country that had one of the first female prime ministers in the modern era, Golda Meir, of course. It's a country that has Nobel laureates in chemistry and has Gal Gadot and many other symbols. It's not perfect like any other democracy. We still have many issues. A big elephant is in the room is the monopoly of rabbinical courts over marriage and divorce, but still the gap between what we see and feel and the messages we get and what I was raised on as an Israeli woman is very big. Now, when you look at the coalitional agreements, when you actually analyze them and read them, these are the agreements that enabled the government to start working together. You find that a significant share of those agreements had to do with demands that would harm the autonomy and equality of women and of LGBTQ+. And the same is true if you look at the tables of legislative proposals that are pending and waiting for the judicial system to be taken over, and then they legislate them so they're not struck down. It's the same. It's an astonishing number of laws have to do with women and with gender queer. Now, before I begin illustrating this point, I want to give you a trigger warning of sorts, because what I'm going to describe again, for those who know Israel, may sound almost too much to be believable. It may sound what's the word? Not serious. Like I'm exaggerating. You know, who is this woman? She's telling us all those, scary stories. It is indeed hard to digest, but it is not an exaggeration, unfortunately. Also, on a personal note, it's kind of uncomfortable for me to describe this reality, and as I'm sure it is for you listening, especially because I present this troubling picture of Israel outside of Israel. My doing so is out of love and deep commitment to the country. So let's pause on some of the government's plans and actions. During the change government, Israel was in the process of joining a document, an international convention called the Istanbul Convention to prevent family or domestic violence. It gives countries important instruments to report, prevent, and deal with violence. The religious right demanded in the coalitional agreements its withdrawal from the process with the pretext that the convention would obligate Israel to open its borders to a flood of Muslim female refugees. Feeding this distorted information was an ultra-conservative think tank called the Kohelet Forum, who has been the most powerful and under-the-radar lobby organization, the richest think tank in Israel. The Kohelet Forum is the organization that wrote the laws for Minister Yariv Levin of the judicial overall. But they don't just do that, they also are very busy writing reports on severe issues that we all should be worried about, such as the problem of false complaints by women that are victims of sexual offenses, or on the exaggerated sums of money paid to women in divorce proceedings. I also want to say on a personal note that I try to make my life as an activist difficult if I speak up against them with threats of defamation lawsuits and other undignified strategies. So that's another point to kind of praise and thank the American protest, because until recently the major funder of the Kohelet Forum was Arthur Danchik, an American right-wing billionaire, but due to the protest in his congregation in Philadelphia, he recently announced that he will stop his financial support. At the same time that the government has been weakening the tools to prevent violence against women, it has eased the criteria for gun licenses in the name of the right of Jews to self-defense. And gun ownership has already risen dramatically. Statistics show, as we know, that guns at home make domestic violence much more physically harmful and lethal, deadly. Initiatives to prevent violence against women that have been underway in their last stage before the elections, the last stage of legislation, were put into freeze or severely curbed. For example, a law on electronic bracelets that people with restraining orders couldn't get near their partners was kind of really minimized. And this is kind of another example of the agenda to reshape the family, retrieving its traditional patriarchal structure and resurrecting the wall between the public and private, such that the state simply releases itself from its responsibility to prevent exploitation and address injustices in the private sphere. One legislative initiative which does concern women's sexual autonomy, and it's already a law, is a legislation that casts severe punishment for nationally motivated sex crimes compared to regular sex crime. So sexual abuse is not a big deal, except when it is committed against are women by people from the other nationality. So when it's contaminating our women's purity and good standing. So the picture is clear. It's not women's autonomy and safety that is the prime concern of the current Knesset, but the nation's honor and its the way it is marked on women's bodies. Many demands of the coalitional partners of the Likud have to do with increasing the weight and authority of religious law and religious rights at the expense of equality. So one law that is underway and the Likud agreed to is kind of a parallel to here the Masterpiece Cake Shop or 303 Creative. So in America it's mainly discussed as harming LGBTQ+, and it's going to in Israel as well. But in Israel there are other very likely results like having quote-unquote modesty rules. Do not enter my store if your shoulders are exposed. Stand in that line. I'm not going to sell you as a woman a Talmud book because I don't think women should study halacha. Of course I'm not going to prescribe you the pill or the morning after or all kinds of other birth control medication. Another item on the list is to increase the authority of rabbinical courts so they can rule not only on family matters, divorce and marriage, but also on civil matters such as torts and contracts. There's not enough time to describe the many other initiatives that give religious men advantages in competing for jobs in the civil service or limiting even the use of gender-inclusive Hebrew. As you know, Hebrew is kind of much more distinctive of female and male pronouns, and even that is kind of increasingly censored. For me, the very volume of the items on the coalitional agreements and the legislation that concerns the harm on gender equality is an attestation of the fact that the advocates of the autocratic theocracy recognize, and they recognize rightfully, that gender is a key element in reshaping society. But this is not how the protest saw it. At least not in the beginning. Even when the liberal camp in Israel started recognizing that it is important to look at the other plans of the government apart from the judicial overhaul, at first and for quite a while, it failed to recognize gender as a key factor in the equation. And I want to illustrate with a few examples. Saturday night, after the speech of Minister Yariv Levin, the big Saturday night demonstrations began. But there was a growing unease among women that our issues do not get enough attention. So on February 6th, a group of feminists, sorry, that's the entourage that I described before here with a meeting and shaking the hands of President Biden. Sorry? Oh, it was Zelensky, sorry, you're right. Yeah, I chose the other picture rather than, just a minute. So on February 6th, a group of women's organizations and activists decided to do a separate demonstration in Habima Square, a central square in Tel Aviv. I had the honor of giving the opening speech. I started my speech with these words. They ask us, why do you need a separate demonstration on women? Why such a split? When women take up space, it is uncomfortable, it's inconvenient, it is challenging for the environment, and the truth is that it doesn't come easily for us as well. We're excellent at taking little room, at giving up, being considerate, moving aside. But this evening, we say without apologizing, we are here and we will not let anyone harm us. That was February 6. On February 9, 3 days later, Aryeh Deri, the criminally indicted head of the Shas, the Sephardic ultra-Orthodox party, declared his intentions to legislate a law that would criminalize immodest dress in the Western Wall, casting heavy fines and up to 6 months in prison for violation, including violations such as mixed prayer or women reading the Torah. This was an attempt to kind of go after the women of the wall, and also to kind of provoke the Likud for something the Likud didn't do. But the public uproar was so huge that after a few hours, Netanyahu did something that he rarely did since, which is to say, no, it's off the table for now. Okay, so it kind of relaxed us. That was February 9. On February 13, one of the first big demonstrations in Jerusalem, because it was the first day when they started to vote on the laws of the judicial overall in front of the Knesset, 20 women marched in gowns dressed in red with handmaid's tales, how do you call them? I forget. Yeah, there's a word. Yeah, sorry, what's the word? Thank you. I learned it and I forgot it. This march, on the one hand, kind of drew international attention. It made it to the Times. Margaret Atwood tweeted on this after a while. But in Israel, there was not only a backlash from the religious right, which there still is, what are you talking about, you're exaggerating, but also the mainstream, women and men who objected the government and were part of the protest, said this is unnecessary, you are removing the potential solidarity of allies that are more kind of in the center, in the mainstream. These discussions we've had strategically also about the occupation. Don't say anything against the occupation because the people that are not with you on that won't join the protest, and I'll get back to this. Since then, Ponot Alternativa, a new, young, vibrant organization building an alternative in English, has been staging incredible displays, which you saw in the beginning in Dizengoff Square, with the women in red, and have been managing to mobilize women on many issues, such as the school curriculum and the upcoming municipal elections. It's really uplifting and impressive. Early March, Haaretz, the liberal newspaper, kind of the equivalent of the New York Times, in my opinion, one of the only real newspapers, serious and ethical in Israel, issues a cover in the weekend magazine, and it's a scary list of laws. It says, and these are the laws. It's kind of like connoting with the Bible. And there's a long list, and I read this list, and I reread this list, and there's not a single mention of the harm to women. There is one mention of the harm to LGBTQ+, but not to women. So I call up Professor Gila Stoppler, who is here, and Professor Nurit Zimmerman, who is here, and many others, and I say, we must do something. And we sit down and we write a counter list, with the same design, an entire cover of the magazine. There is translation to English and to Russian and to other languages, where the whole cover is a list of the harms that are expected to women. Now, friends are telling me, hey, you're using the logo of Haaretz, maybe they'll sue you for intellectual property, you should be careful. And I say, please, let them. And the reason is, I publish in Haaretz, as I said, I think it's one of the only newspapers in Israel, and I text the cover to the owner and to the chief editor of Haaretz. And I do it with, you don't have tone in WhatsApp, but I do it with anger, right? It's like, look, that's what you didn't do in your cover, right? And the response I get is, Nice. That's the response. And this response for me conveys that it still didn't manage to like send the message. Where are you in mapping what is going on? Where is the place that you are serving to women? The same week in early March, I take a part in a news story about sex segregation. And here I should preface with some background very quickly. This is my pet issue. I can talk about it for entire course. Spaces and institutions and activities where men and women are separate are not a new phenomenon in Israel. It's about a decade and a half that is kind of been slowly normalizing in buses, which you may have heard about, but also in institutions such as academia and professional training as a way of the government to help the ultra-Orthodox assimilate and accommodate them into society, also in the military. But before the current government, sex segregation and modesty requirements were a necessary evil of sort, kind of justified apologetically as indeed an inegalitarian practice, but one that is essential on practical grounds to help the ultra-Orthodox integrate, as I say, study, work, serve in the military. And not just justification, was a liberal justification of multiculturalism. Live and let live. They should do what they want in Bnei Brak, and we will do what we want in Tel Aviv. But now the music has become different. Segregation and modesty became an inherent good, expressing and representing the different nature of men and women and the divinely ordained role of each gender. And this is what I tried to say to the reporter in this Channel 12 news story. He asked me, you keep saying that we're on a slippery slope. What is awaiting us at the bottom of the slope? I answered, at the end of the slope is Iran and Afghanistan. The reporter and the photographer and the sound man that is sitting on the couch and you can't see him, the three men in my living room simply sneered. They couldn't hide, they couldn't conceal their disbelief. Here is another woman who exaggerates. Another dimension of the rampant expansion of the distorted religious requirements of accommodation in the public sphere is the effacement of women's images from commercial ads, from news reports, etc. Here too, the vandalizing is not new. This is from a few years ago, but when I talked about it in my lectures, people said, oh, these are bad apples, they're not representing of the mainstream ultra-Orthodox communities in Israel. That's another slice, shampoo against slice with kids on it. It's too immodest. In the middle of May, it was reported that one of the biggest chains of drugstores in Israel, called Shufelsal, accommodated the modesty needs of its customers in the predominantly ultra-Orthodox city of Bnei Brak by using stickers in the logo, the color of Shufelsal, those purple stickers, to cover the faces of the women in the hair paint, dyeing, hair dye. Now, this again is not new. In 2018, in another chain called Superfarm, this happened as well, but you can see that these stickers are improvised. They're kind of under the radar. They're not these, well-designed logo stickers. And the response of the PR of Shufelsal said this: we are proud to accommodate to each population of our customers according to its needs. Okay, so we're all about diversity, and if this is what diversity means, then this is what diversity means. This would have never happened before the election. Let me guarantee you. The response changed later because of the public uproars and threats to boycott the chains. Now, what better illustrations of the way that Jewish supremacy and oppressive gender agendas are intertwined than the following story. I jump forward from May to August, and I'm getting to Yom Kippur. Are you still with me? Do you have an energy to listen to those? Okay. Environment Minister Idit Silman declares that she will start a pilot where in national parks that have water in them, lakes or springs, they will be open for separate hours for men and women after the regular hours. The Attorney General, Gali Baharav Miara, reminds her that she does not have the authority to do so without an explicit authorization by a law of the Knesset, because this is sex-based discrimination in services. Okay, you can't just divide people at will. In response, Ashkenazi ultra-Orthodox MK Moshe Gafni declared that he will promote such a law next time the Knesset convenes, which is in a few weeks. I go on the radio to debate this issue with an ultra-Orthodox female journalist. She argues, among other things, that this is a case where there is joint interest of the ultra-Orthodox and the Arab population in Israel, which is also kind of traditional in its gender roles. And then she praises and glorifies the collaborations across party lines between the religious Jewish parties and the potential to collaborate with the Arabic parties. She neglects to mention that the first parks in the declared pilot of the minister are in the occupied territories, and that access to Palestinians was denied of those parks many years ago. But it's kind of a demonstration of the intersectionality that I'm getting at between all the big issues on the table. A few days later, it was reported that a bus driver in the city of Ashdod, south of Tel Aviv, sent teenage girls on their way to the beach with a bunch of boys. It's a summer holiday, right? It's August. He sent them to the back of the bus, away from the boys, demanded that they cover their exposed hands and legs because there are ultra-Orthodox men on the bus. This is Medinat HaYehudim, the state of the Jews, he explained to them. The country is in uproar. This is now our secular girls, our girls, it's getting to them. The Times features on a Sunday edition another story on segregation where the opening anecdote is that women are not boarded on the train because a bunch of men just said, you can't enter, this is a men's train now, and they're left on the platform. So again, such incidents are not a new phenomenon. We've had them in the recent years, but my sense is that they increase both in frequency because the modesty gatekeepers, the drivers or the men on the train feel that they have support from the top. We are now the majority, and this is the message that the government is sending. And also there's more awareness, and women are understanding the political nature of this. And so they are reporting, and the media is more interested. Because of these incidents, the general protest, the one that takes place in every Saturday in the center of Tel Aviv, decides that the entire lineup of speakers, which is a very big deal, is going to be of women, and through the entire country they have women speaking and women issues. This is one of those huge signs. It's kind of hard to fathom that these are people, and this is a sign that they're doing like above their heads. Here they are in Haifa, they are celebrating women activists, even me, which was kind of fun. That's my name kind of in the sign on the left-hand side. Okay, we're getting close to Yom Kippur, and to a moment that is shocking and sad. I apologize in advance. Religious Zionist Party MK Limor Son HaMelech. Sorry, that's another exposure in the press that we have to those issues. The Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post. It's kind of getting out there. Luckily. Oops. Wait. Sorry, let me explain what's going on here. So she is taking part in a fundraising campaign to exonerate a Jewish terrorist called Amira Ben Uliel, who in 2020 was convicted and sentenced to 20 terms of life imprisonment for burning alive in their home while they were sleeping 3 Palestinians, a mother, a father, and a baby. The other kid was severely wounded, the Wabsha family. And I'll play it and I'll tell you what she's saying. She's saying, and also notice the soft spokenness. You'll find these kinds of women. Professor Lee Ben Shitrit's research on the women that are in the front in the most populist, fundamentalist regimes, and it's a fascinating aspect of the issue which I won't have time to deal with. I know he's innocent, she's saying. I know he's innocent. I was at his cell. This tzaddik, this righteous man, this saint, not only is he not willing to speak to a woman, I bring another man with me so that I will stand behind the man and hide. Even a female guard, he's not talking to the female guards. And it's so beautiful, this sanctity. And it tells you who is this man. He's suffering there for the entire people of Israel in jail. I did apologize. Now how do I go back to my presentation? Good question. Let's see. Okay. We are getting to Yom Kippur. As you recall, Yom Kippur began on Sunday, September 24. The Wednesday before, on September 20th, there is a court hearing. The subject is the nature of the public prayer in Dizengoff Square in Tel Aviv. Dizengoff Square is like Grand Central Station. Okay, it's kind of the focal point. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to offend. It's like Washington Square. Fine. As I am planning my trip here, I started this trip to the US in my alma mater in Ann Arbor, Michigan, where I wrote my dissertation. I'm corresponding with a rabbi in Ann Arbor, and he is kind enough to invite me. He says, if you're in Yom Kippur in Ann Arbor, come to our services. And I said to him, you know, I'm actually flying out right after Yom Kippur, and it's a Yom Kippur where it's important for me to be in Israel because I feel the social fabric is tearing apart, and I won't be surprised if, unfortunately, out of spite, people will, I kind of guess that people will start driving in Yom Kippur, which is a strong convention in Israel. It's not a law, but it's a convention that you don't drive in order to keep the solemnness of the day. But this is not what happened. The social fabric broke in another way. So what was the court hearing? The city of Tel Aviv allowed for outdoor prayers during COVID to save a life out of the synagogue. And it was a regular prayer with a mechitza in the square. And then in this time around, the city told the organization that now we know, the Israelis know, is a very right-winged organization that is all about religizing, converting secular Israelis into a religion and into right-wing fundamentalist views. It asked for permission to organize the prayer, and the city said, yes, no problem, but no longer with a mechitza. You want to sit voluntary, men here, women here, fine, but this is a public space, no mechitzas. This organization is called Rosh Yehudi, Jewish mind or Jewish head, and the head of the Rosh Yehudi said, okay, we will accept the decision of the city, but we will operate for legislation. Next year, the Knesset, our Knesset, will legislate so it is legal. Why the court hearing? There is a petition against the city by a new organization recently registered as a non-profit called the Forum of Liberty and Human Dignity in Israel. And it says that the decision of the city of Tel Aviv is illegal. A, it's anti-Semitic. B, it's a double standard because Palestinians are allowed to do all kinds of events with sex segregation. It's not really accurate. We can get into it if you want to ask me in the Q&A. And C, the most jaw-dropping and original argument was that Tel Aviv is harming the women because, according to Jewish halacha, only men count from minyan, and if this is the case, then it means that men will pray and women will not pray. They'll stay at home. The court says that the decision of the city of Tel Aviv is legal. It's not a problem to deny the mechitza. We need to remember the baseline here. There are 500 synagogues in Tel Aviv where they are funded by tax money of all of us, including people like me that love the prayer and love Judaism, but really don't like the Ezrat Nashim, okay, the mechitza. And the court is saying there is a difference between the synagogue and the city square. The lawyer that submitted the petition, this was issued on Thursday. Friday morning, she petitioned the High Court of Justice. This is another woman for you to research, Lihi. And not the High Court of Justice, the Supreme Court. And Friday afternoon, when the services start on Sunday afternoon, Friday afternoon, the court says that there is no reason for the appeal. It doesn't stop with procedural grounds. It also says a few principled things, such as the public space must be free of distinctions unless there is a very good reason and you minimize the harm to basic rights, and maybe there should be a discussion on the autonomy of municipalities based on their population, but here it's clear that Tel Aviv didn't do anything wrong. Okay, so it's Sunday afternoon, and people around Dizengoff Center, Dizengoff Square convene to kind of check out what's going on. And what they find is that the people that come to pray are out of Tel Aviv. They're basically people from the settlements that were bused to Tel Aviv from Kiryat Arba, from other settlements. And that there is this kunz patent. They don't do a physical mechitza, but they put a rope and they have flags on the rope, and the flag is like, you know, the Israeli flag is now the sign of the emblem of the protest. And the statement is this is still legal. Okay, we're not breaking because it's not a real physical solid mechitza. And the protesters at first really quietly, just as you see here, start piling up the plastic chairs. And it's clear that no prayer is going to happen here, which is very sad, as it is. But unfortunately, it doesn't stop there. It becomes aggressive. Police is involved, some violence, some arrests. Then the WhatsApp groups begin to fill with images of mechitza. Mechitza in Jaffa, mechitza in North Tel Aviv, mechitza in Pardes Chana. It becomes like a real issue. And I feel compelled at the end of Yom Kippur, the next day, to explain to the public, look, This is not a constitutional crisis. The fact that there were mechitzas, the decision of the Supreme Court was given on a Friday. The municipalities didn't have a chance to understand what is going on. And I also say, listen, it's not the role of the courts to prevent sex segregation. This is the role of us as citizens. If we don't like it, we should voice our sense of it. Before this, Yom Kippur comes out, and the entire political spectrum, Prime Minister Netanyahu, Smotrich, Ben Gvir, Gantz, Lapid, they all tweet. And the tweets are sadly very predictable. One side said, you forgot how to be Jewish, you're auto-anti-Semitic, this is outrageous, you're attacking the religious people. And the other side is saying, you are provoking us, all you want is to change the way we live, you're disrespectful, you didn't abide by the court hearing. These are the two narratives. These events are no doubt sad, heartbreaking even, but how should we understand them? Okay. 5 more minutes, it's okay? You're with me? Okay. So for me, they mark a new public understanding, which is an old one for feminism, that the different forms of wrong, injustice, discrimination, and oppression are intertwined. They cannot be compartmentalized. And even if it were possible to rank them in order of importance, gender is way up there in the top of the list, right next to national injustices that linger in Israel, such as the occupation. What the Tel Aviv residents convey through their resistance to the mechitza is related to their sense of the fact that settlers came to Tel Aviv. And what they felt is that it's not only that the government is seeking to normalize Israeli law in the settlements, but it seeks to bring the norms and the values and the Jewish supremacy and the injustice on all sorts of fronts into the heart and center of Israel. For years, mainstream Israel refused to believe that practices aimed at Palestinians in the territories might be turned back and aimed against disobedient citizens or people who have inconvenient opinions. It also refused to believe, and I know this really well, believe me, because I was one of the people they didn't believe, that what happens in Jerusalem and Bnei Brak with gender-divided boardwalks, for men only, or with the effacement of women, will eventually happen in Tel Aviv. This is changing, as the Yom Kippur heartbreaking events illustrated. The realization is sinking in that gender is key to all other forms of justice and equality. Professor Catherine McKinnon wrote once that when you let women in, everybody else enters. The opposite is also true. Permission to exclude and discriminate against women is permission to exclude and discriminate many others. Professor Carol Gilligan, right here across the street, observes that the opposite of patriarchy is not matriarchy, it's democracy. The current crisis helps clarifying that gender equality is fragile, much more fragile than religious freedom, as fragile as Israel's democracy. The challenges are huge, and we might be expecting a backlash, but good may come out of this crisis. Clearer values, a loud and resonating commitment to gender equality as to all other forms of equality. I want to close with the words of Rabbanit Avital Cohen-Brenner, a friend and a colleague at the Shalom Hartman Institute, in one of the speeches she gave in the protest. Oy for us if we come to a point where democracy has to protect us from Judaism. That a that a Jewish and democratic state means that we need democracy because of a Judaism that hates strangers and segregates women. Thank you very much. You were so patient and I went long. Lee, you want to moderate the... If you want, we can take a few questions, even though we're well into the evening. Okay. Comments? Yes.
Polarization is happening, and ways of life and understanding are very ingrained. So we have a problem, right? If you take the example of what you would be, and you look at a group of people who wanted to maintain pizza for their praying, separation of genders, right? And you have another group that said, well, this is unfair. There's two mindsets, like oil and water, but we have to know how to move forward from it and respecting both ways because these are solidly sewn in, right? So what do we do?
First, you're right. That is the question. How do we move forward from this? How do we come out? We're sort of stuck with each other in this, and we need to find a way forward. I want to clarify first, just as my last quote that I read of the Rabbanit indicated, that unlike how it's sometimes depicted or often depicted, it's a clash between Judaism and democracy in Israel. It's a clash between a distorted minority version of Judaism and the other kind of Judaism that is more adaptable and sensible to kind of contemporary morality, and democracy on the other hand. For me, we have tried out the way of camouflaging and ironing the differences, evading them, okay? Not saying out loud. And this is how it got us where we are. That's what I feel. I feel it on the reservation of the center-left parties for so many years to say what they feel about the occupation. And now we have heard about the occupation in those last 10 months way more than we have heard in the last 40 years. It's no longer something that people can ignore. Mainstream former generals, mainstream politicians are saying things that we never heard before. The word apartheid is kind of thrown into air. And I feel that the way forward must be first that each of us speaks the truth, okay? Declares very clearly what are our fundamental beliefs, what is our vision of Israel. I know that I'm not objective, I'm speaking from a liberal perspective, and liberalism is not neutral, you know, like sometimes it's argued to be. But I do feel that the liberal proposal does enable more room for each to live according to their faith, customs, culture. The alternative is that we are all living a life that represent values that we don't want. On the way here, my host and dear friend Nurit showed me the news, and it had to do with the wife of a religious MK. There was a picture of them for some reason, and her head cover was kind of this wrap of material. It was very, very big. And the entire social media made fun of it. I haven't seen it, Nurit described it to me. And there is like huge, you know, again, a public uproar. All the right-wing politicians are exploiting this to say, look at them, they're anti-Jewish, they're not tolerant, they say they're liberal, they're not like this, is anti-feminist, etc., etc., which it is, okay? These are comments that are completely wrong, unnecessary, outrageous. However, the female leaders and emblems of this protest, Shikma Bresler, a professor in the Weizmann Institute, Knesset member Naama Lazimi, myself, we are being attacked and objectified on a daily basis on how we look. There are posts like, why do they call her Yofi? Is this her, you know, that's such a horrible name for this woman. The Yofi means beauty, okay? Shikma Bresler, I wouldn't touch you with a stick. You know, again and again, why are those women so ugly and so unfeminine? Did we ever hear a single denouncement of those reductive harassments and humiliations of women? No, it kind of passes muster. By the way, pretty much from both sides, okay? So the beginning is like, let's speak the truth and discuss the foundations, how we can move further. Before that, if we keep throwing like demagogy at one another, we're not going to move forward. Lihi, you manage this.
Yes, I have a question about specifically the springs in Israel. What, I obviously agree with your
The what?
The springs, the Mayanot.
Okay.
In Israel. What would you say to someone who would claim that the women also feel more comfortable being without men, say in public restroom, where I would prefer to not have men in the restroom,
Right.
or I don't feel safe?
Right. Well, it's a huge issue. We can have another conversation about restrooms and the politics of the question of binary genders. Right now, I'm very comfortable in my reply to you because unlike many years ago, when this proposal surfaced again, it's not the first time, for the first time, religious and ultra-Orthodox women spoke out, which they haven't before. They sometimes spoke with me and with other women that are in the front and are secular saying, you know, we don't want this. But right now they're saying, hey, we've managed for many years to go with our families to those nature reservations. And what they're identifying is that the minute that this is an option, this will be the new normal. And they will not be able to go with their sons and with their husbands to a vacation, which they don't, you know, they don't see them so often in their daily life in the ultra-Orthodox community. So I actually have that's a word that you use in America these days. I curated a list of posts of religious and ultra-Orthodox women saying, you know what? You're not serving me, MK Gafni and Minister Silman. I'll be fine. I don't want it, and they recognize that it's not going to stop there. It's a scheme to broaden the context where modesty and segregation goes with them everywhere they go, not just in the synagogue, not just at home, not in the community, but everywhere to implicate them and me.
So you're
Hi.
saying that the solution is a liberal discussion. Knowing who is on the other side, knowing who is in the political sphere, do you really think it's feasible? And maybe on the same page, same question, do you ever lose hope?
I'm honest, you know, it depends when you ask me. I have days that I'm very pessimistic. I don't sleep well. I haven't been sleeping well for many months, almost a year. And I don't know what to tell you. Sometimes I feel comforted by the fact that Israel is not alone in this, that this is a worldwide phenomenon that we've seen in Hungary and in Poland and in Turkey and in India and maybe here again, God forbid. I am kind of, I draw a lot of strength from the resilience, the determination, the creativity, the kind of, what's happening in Israel now, this is to uplift your spirit, okay? I've been an activist for many, many years. What does an activist want? It wants people to care about her agenda. She's seen something and it's like, you have to go crazy like me about this, you know? Like, and I didn't manage, I managed partly, you know, I had some of my issues draw attention of the media, draw attention of the courts. Many times I failed again and again, bumped into walls. Today, the attention and the connectivity between the groups of the protest is amazing. It's such that I can write a small message explaining something on WhatsApp. 2 hours later, I'll get it from my dad. He doesn't know that I wrote it. He's nearly 80 years old. He received it from his Labor Party elderly, you know, people, or I'll get it from my dear partner's kayak group that is predominantly male. He's sending, oh, this is interesting. Look at me. I'm like, hey, I wrote this. Okay. So there is collaboration, there is networks, there are initiatives, and I know it sounds a little infantile, a little childish, but I just feel so much energy. Hundreds of thousands of people, you know, committed, determined. Something's got to give, something has to change. I wish I knew how, what is the trajectory. I'm not alone in not knowing how. Nobody is, you know, is silly enough to pretend to be a prophet, but that's, you know, kind of the best answer I can give you. Yeah, there have been successes. It's true.
We would be, I don't know where.
It's true. It's true.
Hi, I was curious about your last comment on how society and not the court should be responsible for preventing discrimination. I was curious if you think that, I mean, the fact that not enough rights were maybe cemented in the first place in our legal system is what enabled the deterioration. Just your thoughts.
Great, wonderful question. So, very shortly, in Israel we have not 3 branches. Right now we still have 2. One is the government, and the government controls the Knesset and the courts. The government has suffered from many years from what you can call a deliberative deficit, where things are not discussed. I wish we had like Senate committee hearing culture like you have here. Israelis don't write to their senators. They don't vote with their wallet and contribute to organizations that support the causes. We do vote. We vote once every 6 months. Sorry?
We don't elect our MKs directly.
No, we don't. Yeah, we don't elect our MKs directly. Thank you. And this has caused this double bind, unfair double bind by the court, that many of the explosive issues that belong to the political arena, this is where they should have been determined, find their way to the court. The political system is saying, you deal with this hot potato. Okay? Close the Bar Ilan road on Shabbat, yes or no? This is for politics. Start segregated academic studies. This is an issue that I went to court with the partners on, okay? Why? Because nobody in the government stopped and said, okay, let's examine what does this mean, that we introduce sex into an academic environment. And then it's really like 2 tickets in the price of 1, because now we didn't deal with it as the government, okay, because it's tough. And if the court says something significant, then we get to blame it that it's an activist court, right? It doesn't respect its boundaries with the government. And that's why the court is very moderate, unlike what they blame him. You know, all those months we have been hearing all the criticism about the court overstepping the government. The lawyers in this room and the legal academics, we have a long list of complaints about why the court did not offer sufficient guarantees to civil rights, to human rights in Israel. We don't get to voice them now because it might be confused with delegitimizing the court. I have respectful differences, but I don't delegitimize it. And again, I know the backdrop of how cautious they are, because they want to kind of use their chips carefully, only on I don't think it's the right strategy. I think it's like what I said before. Things should have been said clearly on everything, but that is what I meant. It's not like the court, if something comes to the court like on sex segregation, it should say, what is the right to equality? What does it mean here? But I was afraid that comes Sukkot, we have now the Hakafot, like dancing with the Torah is coming, that the courts will be flooded with petitions against the segregation in Hakafot. And I thought this is a really wrong route to go in, because it's a role of the municipalities, it's a role of civil society. We can't be litigious and wait for the judicial system to sort out our problems. Maybe. Yeah, Hannah. I haven't touched. I mentioned it many times.
In depth, how do you connect both? I just want to say from my own experience, do I go with a red gown because I'm for women's rights, or do I go with a sign and then to the occupation because I'm against racism and I'm against the apartheid state? So how do you resolve those issues? I think the major demonstration that we have now are showing and are mainly on those two issues.
First of all, I want to recognize Hannah Safran, who is a major feminist activist and thinker for many years, and thank you. We're standing on your shoulders. And my answer, which I try to give, is I think that the two are intertwined. And that they're intertwined with other issues, with refugee rights, with the rights of the poor, with the rights of LGBT, and the question of which area in the demonstration and what is your T-shirt is a good question. I think it's happening quickly. The level of tolerance, of acceptance, of anti-occupation messages in the demonstrations now and in January is incomparable. It used to be violent, don't put those Palestinian flags because you're going to spoil. So things are changing, and also the level of acceptance that women's issues are issues. I think what we need to. I'll say this, and I think this should be the last question. I'm sorry, Noam, we can talk later. So we have established, a part of the amazing stuff that is happening, we have established a collaboration of about a third of the law professors in Israel. It's called the Law Professors Forum for Democracy. And we issued the first statement that said, hey, the override clause, watch out. And then we have been writing, go on our website, Law Professors Forum Democracy. There's a lot of stuff in English explaining the implications of the judicial overhaul. And in the discussions that we've had from day one to this day, about a year later almost, it went like this. How do we phrase our mutual or joint statement? A danger to democracy. What does a constant group of wise and rightful people, what do they say? You can't say a danger to democracy because Israel is not a democracy. Why is it not a democracy? What do they have in mind? The occupation, right? And rightfully so. Israel is a very impaired democracy because it controls millions of people without civil rights. But I have to tell you that there are moments, and sometimes, very few times, I voiced them in the group, where I said, Israel is really an impaired democracy on gender because you cannot have a democracy when you are born to a system of rules in marriage and divorce that you cannot control, okay? And when you go to a court that is an all-male court, and that is judging by a system of laws where women still do not have a ability to change and to be part of the shaping of these. It's not democratic, okay? Now, why do I say it only very rarely? Because the response I would get is, oh, she again with, wait, you know, yeah, we'll get to it. But it's not the response we're getting with occupation, okay? This is a real issue. There too, I mean, but my point is that I think that the way in which gender is a linchpin, and it cuts across all those issues, the way in which if you change the structure of the family to or authoritative structure, one model of a family, if you instill religious law in every area of life, if you take care that women in the public sphere mind their dress and are shy about their body because they don't want to be tempestuous and they stand in one side and men in another side, you really prevailed. If you do that, you changed everything else. That's what I truly feel. Thank you very much, folks. Shana Tova.